When people hear the word manchild, they usually picture some guy who runs from responsibility, turns every serious conversation into a joke, and the one thing people always say about him is, when's this guy gonna grow up? Because most of these guys aren't dumb, and they're not incapable either. Some of them have good jobs. Some are genuinely talented. Some even have plans. And a lot of the time, they seem smarter than people who are living way more stable lives than they are. So what's really going on here? Because if it was just laziness, this probably wouldn't be this complicated. And maybe the answer starts somewhere most people never even bother to look. Not everyone deals with discomfort the same way. Some people slowly learn that pressure, uncertainty, and tough emotions are just part of life. And then there are people who learn, somewhere in childhood or at some point along the way, that it's just easier to dodge discomfort than to sit with it. That's probably why you've seen guys who seem totally fine as long as everything's going smoothly. But the second there's a hard conversation to have, a decision to make, or some responsibility to take on, their attention suddenly goes somewhere else. One more game, one more video, one more "I'll get serious tomorrow." And tomorrow just never really shows up. Most people call this laziness. But a lot of the time, it's not about avoiding the task. It's about avoiding the feeling that comes with it. Stuff like failure, pressure, embarrassment, or that uncomfortable feeling that's telling someone, hey, you're running out of excuses and there's more responsibility waiting for you now. Psychologists have a name for this. They call it avoidance coping. Back in the 60s and 70s, Walter Mischel was studying self-control and delayed gratification, and he noticed something. Some people learn to handle tough feelings, and others just get into the habit of running from them. And over time, people get really good at avoiding hard emotions, but not so good at facing them. Because age just keeps doing its thing. Birthdays come every year regardless. But emotional growth doesn't work like that. It's not automatic. That's why sometimes you'll see a guy in his 30s or 40s who's got his job handled, pays his bills, manages most of his daily life just fine. But then someone disagrees with him, or criticizes him, or tries to have a hard conversation with him, and suddenly his reaction feels way bigger than what the moment called for. Like disagreement feels like rejection. Like criticism feels like an insult. Like every bit of frustration feels like a personal attack hiding underneath. And that's usually why reactions like this get tied to emotional immaturity. And that doesn't mean the guy lacks understanding. It just means his emotional skills and his actual age didn't grow at the same speed. Psychologist Erik Erikson, whose work got pretty well known back in the 1950s, pointed out way back then that getting older and growing up aren't always the same thing. And that's probably why some relationships slowly start feeling kind of off. Because in the beginning, everything feels normal, but over time, one person starts feeling less like a partner and more like a caretaker. Every problem ends up landing on them. Every emotional meltdown falls on their shoulders. And little by little, the relationship turns into something where one person's carrying all the weight and the other one's just avoiding it. John Bowlby, one of the guys who basically built attachment theory back in the 60s, helped explain how the way we learn security and comfort early in life can keep shaping our relationships years down the line.
That's why support and emotional parenting aren't the same thing. A partner can stand by you, but they can't be responsible for every battle going on inside your head. But maybe the biggest confusion comes from somewhere else completely. Because everyone loves freedom, living life your own way, doing whatever you feel like, not answering to anybody. Nothing wrong with that. But there's a part of being an adult that's just not that exciting. Routines, limits, sacrifices, the stuff you gotta do whether you're in the mood or not. This is basically tied to self-regulation, which is just the ability to do something even when you really don't feel like doing it. Because being mature usually means doing the thing your mood is actively against. And not everyone picks up that skill at the same pace. But maybe the hardest part is, growing up isn't just about gaining new stuff. Growing up is also about letting go of old expectations.
At some point, everyone's got to accept that life isn't going to hand them everything the way they once pictured it. Some plans are going to change. Some dreams are going to look different. And a lot of the time, you have to accept that having potential and actually achieving something aren't the same thing. Part of Erik Erikson's research touched on exactly this kind of adjustment, because in his view, Growing up wasn't just about stepping into new roles. It was also about leaving certain expectations behind. Because growing up isn't only about what you achieve. A lot of the time, it's also about what you're willing to let go of. And maybe that's exactly where some people get stuck. Because in your imagination, every door stays open. Not in real life. Reality wants you to choose. Reality wants trade-offs. Reality also wants you to let go of certain things so you can go after others. And not everyone goes through that the same way. That's why man-child doesn't always mean some guy just refuses to grow up. A lot of the time, it just means his age kept moving forward, but his emotional growth didn't keep up with it everywhere. And until someone actually understands the places where he learned to avoid discomfort, no matter how much of an adult he looks like on the outside, some old patterns are still going to keep following him around. And maybe that's exactly why people get growing up wrong. Because maturity was never about fear just disappearing, or having an answer for everything. It was always about learning to sit with the responsibilities, the uncertainty, and the uncomfortable feelings someone might have spent years running from.